Students often ask, how can you tell if it's the short run or the long run when you're thinking about an economic model? So in this video, I'm going to explain that. And there's going to be a slightly different answer whether you're in Principles of Economics or Econ 101 or Microeconomic Theory. So in this video, first I'm going to go over the Principles of Economics answer, then I'll go over the micro theory answer, and then I'll talk a little bit about what does this say about economic thinking more broadly. And just to be clear, I'm not going to explain these diagrams, that's not this video, but I have these diagrams up here to remind you what you were probably doing in your Principles of Economics course when you talked about the short run and the long run. So first, the Economics 101 answer to this is that in the short run, capital is fixed. And what that means is that the firm has to assume it has a certain number of factories, a certain number of stores, and it can't open new stores or close new stores or buy an entirely new assembly line machine in the short run. In the short run, all it can really decide is how many workers to employ, how many bags of flour to buy to produce the product with its given set of machines and buildings, etc. And if you really think about this, you're going to realize that the length of the short run versus the long run is going to be different by industry. If you're talking about someone who owns a food truck business, for example, the long run might be like 1 month for them. It might be really easy for them to shut down the entire operation because they can just sell the van, and that's a pretty easy thing to do. Whereas if you're talking about like an airplane manufacturing company, expanding capacity or reducing capacity is actually going to be really complicated. You can't just sell those factories on Craigslist. Shutting down operations is going to be a big ordeal. And same with expanding operations. Building a new factory to build planes is going to be very complicated. It's going to involve ordering a lot of complicated machinery, so the long run for that might be 2 years. And those are kind of two ends of the spectrum. The food trucks may be a 1 month difference between short run and long run. The airplane manufacturing company is maybe a 5-year difference between short run and long run. But for lots of companies, there's going to be something in between. And just to very briefly connect it with these diagrams are in equilibrium the way I've drawn them, meaning that firms are making zero profits, they're paying their owners exactly how much they need to pay them so that the owners are willing to own the company. That's this diagram. If something happened where demand for the product suddenly increased, then this representative firm would suddenly be making a profit. Other people would look at that, they'd get jealous, they'd build their own factories and enter the industry, which would shift supply out until you're back at equilibrium. So the short run you can think of as the day-to-day, month-to-month decision that managers make when they try to decide how many workers to hire, how much stuff to buy, to use the capital well. And the long run is really the decision, should we build a new factory? Should we expand? Should we enter the industry? Should we shut down operations because we can't make a profit? Those are the long run decisions. And you can kind of think of it as the long run decisions are probably going to be made at the annual retreat where the CEO and the leadership team sort of think more broadly about the company's future. That's a long run decision. It's made once a year, and there's a very broad frame for that decision. The short run decisions are made by kind of middle management. So that's one way of thinking about it. And of course, what are we doing when we're looking at problems like this? We're really trying to figure out how is this industry going to change in response to some sort of change in market conditions. And we want to know how will they change in the next month? What's going to happen in the industry for the next month or 2 or 3 months? And then we can also zoom back and say, well, given the change that happened over here, what's going to happen in this industry as it adjusts in the long run? And those are two different questions, but they're both meaningful because short run adjustments can happen more quickly and then long run adjustments happen more slowly. But industries in the economy tend to be moving toward the short run equilibrium quickly and moving toward the long run equilibrium more slowly. And both of those trends are trends we might want to keep track of. So next, what's the microeconomic theory version of short run and long run? Well, this is going to have to do with what is a choice variable and what is fixed right now. So I've set up what is actually a long run profit maximization problem, but let's go through it and explain how this would differ in the short run. So here we have this company is maximizing profit. That's their objective function. It's a profit maximization problem. We have the choice variables here are going to be inputs. Two inputs, which I'm just going to let be labor and capital, where capital might be robots. And we have revenue minus costs, where revenue is simply price times quantity, as it often is. There's an exogenous price, which means that this is a perfectly competitive market where firms are price takers, and that's multiplied by quantity, and the quantity that the firm produces is going to be a function of its inputs, its labor and its capital. It's people and it's robots. And of course, this is a production function because it's how much are we producing as a function of the two inputs. And of course, we're just subtracting costs. These are linear. So we've got wage times number of worker hours, and we've got price of robots times quantity of robots that we're employing. Now, why is this a long run maximization problem? It's a long run maximization problem because capital is variable. The firm can decide, do we want to buy more robots to open an entirely new assembly line? Do we want to close down operation and sell all of our machinery? The firm has full control over all of its inputs right now. So this really is a long run maximization problem. And you might imagine these decisions about how many new big robots they might buy, where a robot might be an actual assembly line. Those decisions are going to be made by the CEO at these annual meetings where they really think about the long run of their company. The middle managers are going to be the ones to make the decisions about how many workers to hire. And both of those things are variable in this equation. So how do you know if it's short run or long run? Well, capital is fixed. So how would we turn this profit maximization function into a short run problem? We would simply make capital exogenous. So let's do that. So now the only choice variable is the labor to employ. We're assuming the amount of capital that we're going to employ is totally fixed, and that whoever is making this decision, which is probably middle management, they have no control over capital, no control over the number of robots. So this is a short run decision. And this is going to tell us actually something about the way economists think. And thinking more carefully about this phenomenon, about the fact that we get to decide what our choice variables are, and we can decide that there are some things the firm does control which are not currently choice variables. Thinking about that is going to give us some insight in terms of how economists think more generally, which is economists think in optimization problems where we're carefully placing what is the choice that I want to focus on right now. Am I trying to help the manager decide how many workers to hire? Is that the focus? If so, maybe I want to reduce all of the other noise about the other decisions that this particular manager might have to make. So they probably also have to make decisions about how much advertising to invest in, how much sugar to buy, how many scientists to hire for innovation purposes. There's probably a lot of decisions that this manager makes, but this model is just about one of those decisions, and we're allowed to quiet all of those other decisions to focus more carefully on one of them. And that's just a general principle in model building. So in this context, the short run versus long run is actually less about the external reality of the world and more about what decisions do we want to focus on and what decisions do we want to just hold fixed and not vary so that we can think more carefully about a single decision at a time. And of course, it would be possible to add all of the decisions that management in this company ever makes into this problem. So I've just added a few. I've added advertising, research and development, and capital. You could probably go on and on and on for every decision that managers make. And of course, I haven't yet built a couple of these into the model, but I certainly could build those in. And if you were to build a model with a lot of variable factors, that really is sort of the annual meeting with the CEO and the leadership team where they're thinking very broadly about the firm and about everything that could possibly change. These these decisions with lots of choice variables are going to happen less frequently because they're complex decisions, and constantly reevaluating each of them is just not going to be a good use of upper management's time. But it would be possible to actually say, you know what, this isn't the annual meeting, but we're kind of wondering if our advertising campaign is really the right level of investment. Let's quiet all of the other decisions, including the decisions about labor, and just focus on advertising and build a model of that. And you could do that. That would absolutely be something you could do. Is that a short-run model? Yes, it's a short-run model because you're quieting the decisions about other things the firm would do. So this is just a general principle about microeconomic modeling, which is you're not modeling every decision possible, you're narrowing down the scope. And the more decisions you add, the more long-term the model is. The more broad it is, the more big picture it is. And that means you're sort of thinking on a longer-term scale. And once again, what's the length of time associated with that longer-term scale? That depends on the company. It depends on how easy is it for the company to make all of the shifts in all the possible variables that they could be thinking about. So that's just a general overview of short run and long run and how it relates to both principles of economics and microeconomic theory.